Headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is from the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. The 8th regular Congress of the Communist Party of Cuba started Friday in Havana in the midst of a vast financial and economic reforms launched in January to cope with the country's shortcomings. Cuba has been for over 60 years building a socialist society under a constant blockade from the United States. The ruling party gathering will close on Sunday. The meeting's purpose is to stress strategies to boost the Cuban economy in the 2021 to 2026 five-year period, on the wake of additional difficulties caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Congress is also expected to evaluate the National Economic and Social Development Plan 2030 agreed upon the last five-year period. The first stage, covering the years 2019 to 2021, has suffered from the tightening of the U.S. blockade and the worsening of financial and fuel restrictions imposed by Washington. The government of President Miguel Díaz-Canel is emphasizing on the intensive use of innovation and the country's vast scientific and technological know-how to provide the Cuban Revolution with a far-reaching development strategy. Haiti saw a new day of protests this Thursday to demand the resignation of President Jovenel Moïse and answers to the ongoing political and social crisis in the country. Civil organizations mobilized in the capital, Port-au-Prince, and were met with police repression, who fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse them. Haitians denounced the authoritarian inclinations of the current government and the support of the international community for the president, who they stress has maintained his grip on power despite the term in office having come to an end. President Moïse has reiterated that he will remain in office until 2022, despite the fact that the judicial branch has determined that his constitutional term expired on February the 7th. In this context, various sectors in Haiti are calling for strike action in rejection of the significant insecurity that the country is experiencing. Through a statement, several religious movements criticize the lack of security in the country. Meanwhile, several social movements have mobilized to denounce the lack of concrete action on the part of the current government of stop the wave of kidnappings for ransom. They stress that the authorities are not doing anything to solve the crisis. In Costa Rica, the president of the National Commission for Risk Prevention and Emergency Care, Alexander Solis, referred to the yellow alert declared by the national government in the face of intense rains registered in the last hours.
We have had rainfall during the last few hours, practically throughout the Central Valley, the entire Pacific slope, with the exception of some higher cantons in the North Pacific. Because of this situation, we have declared a yellow alert in virtually the entire national territory except some cantons in the North Pacific.
Panamanian civil authorities began on Thursday the preventive evacuation of residents in vulnerable areas due to the intense rainfall recorded in the last hours. Panama's civil defense announced the evacuation of 250 people endangered by the floods in the district of Newtown. Heavy rains and thunderstorms have affected northern Panama in the last few days. The same region registered the severe damage last November by the passage of Hurricane Ida. Authorities described the current storm as a cold front whose low-pressure system also affects neighboring Costa Rica, where a state of alert was imposed. According to a poll conducted by the Poder Data Institute, former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva will beat current President Jair Bolsonaro in the 2022 presidential elections with a lead of 18 percentage points. The poll shows the far-right President Jair Bolsonaro will lose the election in a second-round vote against Lula da Silva with 34% of the vote compared to 52% for Lula. The Institute conducted 3,500 interviews between April 12th and 14th to compile all the data. The next presidential election is scheduled for October 2nd, 2022. A new explosion took place on Friday morning at La Soufriere volcano in the Caribbean island of St. Vincent. The ash column reached a high estimated at roughly 8,000 meters. Winds are pushing the coast westwards, the seismic service reported. After 40 hours of quiet, La Soufrière erupted again on Friday morning. Seismic activity at La Soufrière re-continued as before with a near-constant swarm of long-period and hybrid earthquake. The seismic service stated that the first successful measurements of sulfur dioxide flux at the La Soufrière were undertaken along the west coast and yielded an average of 809 tons per day. The presence of this component indicates that fresh magma from deeper source is being degassed, indicating that the eruption is continuing. Explosions with accompanying ashfall of similar or larger size could restart in the future, impacting St. Vincent and neighboring islands. The is at alert level red. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The United Nations Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, is holding a special high-level meeting called A Vaccine for All, starting on Friday. The meeting is discussing ways to close the funding gap between industrial and developing countries and maximize supply, accessibility, and distribution of doses worldwide. Fast and immense progress has been made with the launch of a number of vaccines against COVID-19 in many countries. However, unequal access to jabs is threatening to further deepen the divide between poor and rich countries. ECOSOC will explore ways to ensure equal access to the vaccine as a global public good. Also discuss what kind of measures must be taken to strengthen countries' capacities, infrastructure, and preparedness for vaccine distribution and other health crises. A COVID-19 double mutant variant has been identified in 10 states in India thus far, authorities from the health ministry told local media on Thursday. Scientists described the new double mutation strain as a hybrid from the South African, British, and Brazilian variants of the coronavirus. Experts have noted that it is not possible to confirm whether the mutation is responsible for the alarming rise in infections. However, the UK variant has been found in 80% of people with COVID-19 in Punjab. Officials are also analyzing the role of the double mutants in COVID-19 linked deaths, the severity of infections, preliminary infection, reinfection, and its effects on vaccination. France has become the third Western European country to pass the milestone of 100,000 deaths from COVID-19. Data from the Health Ministry's GEODS website said French hospitals registered 300 COVID-19 deaths in the last 24 hours, which pushing the overall tally to more than 100,000. In the past 30 days, France has registered on average over 33,000 new COVID-19 deaths per day, or 9,000 per month, compared to nearly 16,000 per month during the second lockdown. On Thursday, a top official from the World Health Organization stressed that about 1.6 million new COVID-19 cases are reported each week in Europe, where the death toll has already passed 1 million. According to Dr. Hans Kluge, regional director of the WHO in Europe, the situation remains very serious. He emphasized the continent must keep up its guard with social distancing and speed up vaccinations as new virus strains drive infections to record levels in some nations. A tally by Johns Hopkins University shows nearly 3 million deaths linked to COVID-19 worldwide, with the United States, Brazil, and Mexico reporting the highest number of fatalities, collectively representing more than 1.1 million. The Norwegian government has decided to postpone making a final decision on the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine, despite a recommendation from the country's Institute of Public Health to withdraw the vaccine from the COVID-19 vaccination program. Due to reports of a combination of rare blood clots and a low count of blood platelets, Norway suspended AstraZeneca vaccination in March. In the meantime, recommendations of the country's top scientists are being followed, while the government has called for further investigation into what impact suspending AstraZeneca would have on public health. The Norwegian news agency NTB reported on Wednesday that the country has nearly 200,000 doses of AstraZeneca with expiration dates in June and July. Health authorities in Uruguay reported a new record of 79 deaths by COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. Over 1,600 people have so far died from the disease. The Health Ministry of Public Health informed that more than 2,000 new contagions had been registered on Thursday, for a total of 152,000 infected in this country of some 3.5 million people. According to a web monitor developed by the ministry, Uruguay already inoculated more than a million people, while official sources indicate that the capital, Montevideo, is where most active cases are being detected, with over 14,000 infected. At the second meeting of ministers of the Ibero-American Summit, the government of Mexico expressed its concerns at the irregularities in the distribution of vaccines and drugs against COVID-19 throughout the world.
It is evident that there is a very important asymmetry in the capacity of technological development as well as large-scale production, so that it was an early concern and it is still a concern to share with the rest of the world. So now, we are in a very difficult season. Maybe it does not reach a little more than 5%, what COVAX has been able to do most of the countries that are in this conversation support this multilateral mechanism, but in its absence it has been marginal. So far important, certainly not minimized, but marginal compared to what could be expected.
The Mexican diplomat also proposed to his colleagues to promote joint projects to develop the technological and scientific system in the member countries of the Ibero-American Summit.
Our strategic purpose is to have the necessary development to reduce the dependence that we have at the moment on vaccines and probably later on to associated to vaccines, because access to new technologies is important for the future of medicine. Therefore, our societies would like to take advantage of this situation to underline the importance that we consider in this case we are talking about vaccines, but we could extend them to other fields. The importance that we can make a synergy and have research accelerated becoming an accelerator on an important scale of technological development necessary to ensure our ability to respond to such case phenomena like the one we are now living.
And we have more stories coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. At least 8 people were killed in a shooting in the United States city of Indianapolis. All the victims died at a FedEx facility where the shooting took place late Thursday. The incident in Indianapolis follows a spate of mass shootings across the U.S. in recent weeks. At the end of last month, 4 people, including a child, were shot dead in an office building in Southern California. On March 22nd, 10 people were killed at a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado. That came less than a week after a man shot and killed 8 people, including 6 women of Asian descent, at a spa in Atlanta, Georgia. Thursday's shooting was the 3rd in Indianapolis this year.
After a preliminary search of the grounds, inside and out, we have located 8 people at the scene with injuries consistent to gunshot wounds. Those 8 were pronounced deceased here at the scene. We have been made aware of multiple other people with injuries who have been transported to local hospitals or who have transported themselves to local hospitals.
Japan's Prime Minister headed to Washington on Thursday to become the first foreign leader to hold face-to-face talks with the U.S. President Joe Biden, with concerns about China topping the agenda. Yoshihide Suga will be hoping to renew the alliance with Washington after the Trump era, as well as compare notes on Beijing, as the two nations have become allies in their attacks on China. The trip comes after the two top U.S. officials visited Japan in March and following a summit of leaders from the Quad Alliance, a grouping of the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. A Russian response to the latest United States sanctions is inevitable, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova warned on Thursday as the U.S. ambassador to Moscow, John Sullivan, was summoned to the ministry to be briefed. The United States announced economic sanctions against Russia earlier on Thursday and the expulsion of 10 diplomats in retaliation for what was described as electoral interference, massive cyber attacks, and other hostile activities. Russia has denied all these accusations. The new wave of sanctions came amidst escalating tensions in recent weeks, with Ukraine reinforcing its military presence on its borders with Russia, as well as reports of the deployment of 2 United States warships to the Black Sea, a move which was since been cancelled.
The United States is not ready to come to terms with the objective reality that there is a multipolar world that excludes American hegemony. They are betting on sanctions and interference in our internal affairs. Such aggressive behavior is sure to be firmly countered. A response to sanctions is inevitable. Washington needs to understand that there is a price to pay for the degradation on bilateral relations. The responsibility for what is happening lies entirely with the United States.
Iran has already started enriching its uranium to 60% purity. The move was announced earlier in the week by Iranian President Hassan Rouhani in response to the sabotage at the country's Natanz nuclear facility. The president of the Iranian parliament, Mohammad Bakir Qalibaf, stated that a team of Iranian nuclear researchers managed to produce the 60% enrichment of the uranium for medical and peaceful purposes, such as power generation and medical research. The announcement also marks a significant escalation after the sabotage, the damaged centrifuges, and attacks suspected of having been carried out by Israel. In Iraq, an explosion shook a market in East Baghdad on Thursday, killing 1 person and injuring 12 others. The blast is the second in the Iraqi capital this year. The Baghdad police chief told local media that the explosion was caused by a car bomb. No group has claimed responsibility for this attack. The incident came hours after drone strikes targeted the U.S.-led coalition troops near Erbil airport and a Turkish military base in the north of the country. There was no immediate confirmation of any link between the two attacks and no claim of responsibility. Some 20 bomb or rocket attacks have targeted bases housing the U.S. soldiers or diplomats in Iraq since the U.S. President Joe Biden took office, while the demand that all foreign troops withdraw from the country is still to be made. The United Nations and its aid partners have seen no proof of a declared withdrawal of Eritrean troops from Ethiopia's Tigray region, according to the world body's top humanitarian official, who also warned that the situation in the embattled region has deteriorated. The comments by Mark Lowcock during a closed-door UN Security Council meeting on Thursday came more than 2 weeks after Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said Eritrea had agreed to withdraw the allied forces it had sent into the northern Ethiopian region during the conflict that broke out there in November 2020. After months of tensions, Abiy sent government forces into the Tigray on November the 4th to detain and disarm leaders of the Tigray's People Liberation Front, the then regional ruling party that for decades dominated Ethiopia's politics. Benin Constitutional Court on Thursday approved the provisional results of the April 11th election, giving President Patrice Talon a landslide re-election victory with 86.3% of the vote. The president addressed the nation thanking his supporters.
Of the circumstances in which the elections took place, the threats, the intoxications that we have known, we have seen, the violence that we have witnessed. In spite of all that, more than half of the voters went to the polls and expressed their choice. This is something that must be underlined and welcomed. We have come a long way, and we will go a long way. Now, each one of us will have to see the effects of our common effort in his house, in his personal well-being, and this may seem immense, but for me, it will be easy. It will be easy because now we know how to do it.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.